This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Let's build the nation's premier smart bay in partnership with the University of Rhode Island that will make our state a world-leading center for researching, developing, and testing ocean technology. Let's also increase our port capacity to support offshore wind supply chain by making critical investments in the Port of Davisville at Quonset and in East Providence at South Key.
And that right there, some audio from Governor McKee at the State of the State address last month, in which the governor announced some plans for significant investment into the blue economy here in Rhode Island. And that begs the question for a lot of you probably, what exactly is the blue economy? Now, it's something that we've talked about fairly regularly here on B-Town, and it's something that I allude to when discussing, where Rhode Island's going and how we can harness our talents and our opportunities to produce a better future. But it still is sort of a vague term for a lot of you, and understanding what this super sector is and how it plays into our history and our present and our future all at once. And I think it's a critical thing to explore, and to help us kind of navigate this today is the Chief Development Officer of the University of Rhode Island, Pete Rumsey, breaking down what exactly is the blue economy and what's happening right now in this cluster and what it means for all of us here in Rhode Island. It's Bill Bartholomew here with you for another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. Always great to have you on board. Remember, if you want to support the pod, you can simply follow, rate, and review wherever you're listening right now. And if you want to go a step further, head to patreon.com/BartholomewTown, where for as little as $3 per month, you may help to sustain this program. You'll also find exclusive content, including 2 interviews that I conducted on the floor of the House of Representatives after the State of the State address on the blue economy. They're short interviews, short conversations, one with URI President Mark Parlange and the other with Commerce Secretary Stefan Pryor. So the blue economy, it's a term you're going to hear more and more and more as we continue to move forward here. And it's something that impacts all of us. And, I get it. I think there's a tendency, not only here in Rhode Island, but in general, for when you hear these kinds of descriptions of whether it's sectors or programs or whatever it is, sometimes you go, well, how does that apply to me? You know what I mean? Who really benefits from this? And sure, there's always in any kind of business venture in the economic system that we exist in, there's always going to be quote unquote winners and losers. But I genuinely believe, I'm really passionate about this sector, and I'm really passionate about everybody in Rhode Island getting behind it, because it's one of those deals where we all kind of benefit. You know what I mean? And we all have a chance to raise Rhode Island's profile in so many different aspects, from the academic side to the industrial side to the ecological and environmental side to the equity side to the jobs of the future side of things. It's all there. You know what I mean? It's all there. And it's just one of those areas that probably should rise above politics and rise above anything else and just be a focal point for where we're going. You know what I mean? I really genuinely believe that. So Pete Rumsey, I love this guy. Tons of enthusiasm. This is like exactly what you're looking for whenever you're discussing a topic. Somebody who is informed, passionate, and right in the thick of the action. So hopefully you enjoy this conversation. If you have a thought on the blue economy or anything really, and you want to discuss it with me or leave a comment that you want read on the show, if you have an idea for once you hear this episode, how Rhode Island can be best positioned in this sector, send me an email. You can do it anytime, bill@ripodcast.com, or tweet at me at Bill Bartholomew. Okay, so today we are having a discussion that, look, this is an area that some people are all in on here in Rhode Island. Some people have been all in on it for a little while now. And other people probably by now have heard the term, but they're not quite sure if you're listening to this right now and you're not quite sure what the term blue economy means. We're going to address that today. We're going to take a deep dive and take a look at this. And I guess to start, let's talk about the fact that Governor McKee, during his State of the State address just about a month ago now, referenced investments in the blue economy, significant investments. And I caught up with URI President Mark Parlange and Commerce Secretary Pryor Stefan Pryor, after the State of the State speech on the floor of the Rhode Island House of Representatives. You can hear those interviews on our Patreon page at patreon.com/BartholomewTown. But we're going to go 36,000 feet and then take a deep dive into some of this stuff today. So, Pete, I guess if you could just kind of set up the most basic of questions. What is the blue economy and how does it impact Rhode Island?
Very good, Bill. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk and brainstorm with you on this. So starting with that first, as you said, 40,000 foot view of what is the blue economy. It's really interesting, and as you know, and we even chatted about offline, the Rhode Island is known as the Ocean State for a reason. And we have a really proud heritage with this. And what we're able to do is really define the blue economy that we know from the past and see emerging, and even to help define it for the future. So with that in mind, kind of looking back just a little ways and even currently, as we had to address this question in putting in an application for the Federal Economic Development Agency, and even before that, looking at setting up innovation centers around the blue economy, we had to define it ourselves. And we used a model that was really developed with the Coastal Resources Center and a gal named Jen McCann down here at URI at the Bay campus. And we see it as being 6 or 7 sectors. Let's say 6 sectors. We'll combine 2 particular industries. So those industries are aquaculture and fisheries. So we'll call that one. Ports and shipping be another economic segment or sector. Defense, marine trades, and then ocean-based renewables. And then on top of all of that, very strong in Rhode Island is tourism and recreation. So those were the 6 areas. And these 6 industries, if you would, or economic sectors really create a super sector, or even in very progressive modern economic speak, they're a cluster, and really a super cluster that is actually growing faster here in New England, in particular, Southern New England, and in particular, as you double click on that, Rhode Island. And in Rhode Island, if my memory serves me right, it's about a $5 billion sector per annum output, and it's over 10% of our regional gross product. So it's a big piece and rapidly growing in our economy. And it's almost somewhere between 65 and 70,000 workers and north of 10% of our workforce, I think 12 or 13% of our workforce. And again, those numbers are growing every day. So it's one of these things where from standing back and looking at it from a distance, you can see that this thing's a rocket ship, that if you can give it a little love and sunshine, it's really going to grow. And as such, it just represents an incredible opportunity for us as a state, and even working with the rest of the region. And then from the federal level, looking at us to really lead the way, and even, and we can talk about it later, help redefine what is that blue economy. Because I laid out to you a very traditional, like 6 sector model. But as we start to really understand it and the world starts to change, we see other overlays on top of that, like resiliency, the ability, whether that be economic resiliency or climate resiliency, recovering after pandemics, like a resiliency on top of it, and also health and sustainability. So we can talk about those more later, but actually it's with our proposal that we're putting together and the work that the governor and the commerce secretary and the president of URI and everybody is spurring us to do here, we get a chance to define or redefine what is the blue economy, not just from a good current economic model, but looking into the future about what it could be and what it has to contain to really be effective.
And what's fascinating about this super sector, which is, or cluster, however you want to describe it, we can look back to really our earliest available history as a species here in this region. And I mean, it's on a whole different level, but renewables, fisheries, shipping, these are all things that have defined what is known as Rhode Island for centuries. So in many ways, it's not even necessarily brand new. I think a lot of people hear an idea like, oh, the blue economy, who came up with this at the State House? What's their salary? This like negative sort of approach to it. But the reality is, this is who we're made of here in Rhode Island. This is how we've identified ourselves to the world for centuries.
That's exactly right.
Hyper specifically, our fisheries, our defense, couldn't get more interesting than our tourism and recreation aspects here. These are all things that are fairly embedded into our culture. It's just being interpreted and placed into this super sector in a new way that is strategically allowing for a lot of optimism and growth. And I guess right now, where we're at today here in February 2022, what's the state of the blue economy in Rhode Island in terms of where we are and where we're going to get to in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, that's. I think you're exactly right, Bill. It's really. That's exactly right. That like we know we were really the seat of the Industrial Revolution here, and that came as a result of being at the center of a blue economy. If you actually look at how that all boiled up and made possible, I think there's incredible optimism in the sector, as you said, because it's such a proven success story for the Rhode Island economy historically, and then as we talked about there briefly, as it's growing. And we have a unique, and many people on my team always point out, we have a unique density of natural assets as well as industry and ecosystem assets that are coming together to really to help us drive towards strengthening this sector on a wide scale in Rhode Island, and then regionally, and then across the United States. And if I had to pick at what some of those resources are, like our credentials, maybe I'd point out four things really quickly, just top of mind. The first is we are home to the first and still only operational offshore wind farm. People forget about that, but it's something we need to be really proud of. And the reason that happened is because Rhode Island is small enough to get things done quickly, and small enough to bring the right parties together, including in this case, some magical stuff that happened with offshore, the SAMP assessment with URI and coastal resources and the government and private industry. But we're also big enough to make a real difference, so that small, agile, nimble, get everybody together, but also big enough that we can do big things. And that's what we're really driving here. So we're home to that first offshore wind farm, and we're rapidly building this collection, this ecosystem of companies driving the offshore wind industry, including some great work done by the folks at Rhode Island Commerce, Hillary Fagan and her team, looking at building that supply chain and really making sure that we're positioned. We'll talk about it later. So one or actually two of the different things we have targeted project for our proposal, really focused at building that offshore wind ecosystem. Other credentials, right? We started by saying education and research really are very big. Between down at the URI Bay campus with the Graduate School of Oceanography, as well as the Ocean Engineering School, which is unique actually in the world and in the top 3, I think, in the world. You take that, you combine it then with like federal assets, like the Naval Sea Warfare Center, and even DEM, the Rhode Island DEM, and the assets they have with Newark and even NOAA. And you take that research institution and those assets with the federal assets, as well as the center of excellence that Newark represents, and you combine it with an ecosystem that's driving programming, like 401 Tech Bridge is a really good example of that. And 401 Tech Bridge recently partnering with Mass Challenge, which is a accelerator in really focusing on blue tech acceleration, and also See Ahead, the See Ahead folks focusing on doing innovation in this space. And we really have a unique advantage, therefore, when it comes to identifying the talent, putting the programs together, and really making sure that we're driving the research and into making products and things and services and ultimately companies and jobs in this blue economy. Also, all part of that is our manufacturing, as you pointed out from the very beginning. We've been at the forefront of boat building in the marine trades for centuries now, and we're not letting up. It's morphed a little bit. We're now doing advanced composites. There's companies like Gertz and Blanc Boats who are doing advanced composites. They're not only working on like America Cup yachts, but they're working on advanced things that we're not supposed to talk about for underwater unmanned vehicles that go very deep and very far and are powered by lithium ion and very interesting technologies. And also with like the Blanc Boats folks and others working on offshore wind transport vehicles, which are a whole different breed as you start to have to move in and out very quickly out onto the SAMP, out to the wind farms themselves to work on them. And then finally, what makes that all possible too is some natural resources combined with man-made ingenuity into our ports. We have some really good assets there. I mean, starting historically with the Port of Galilee and one of the best fleets of fishing boats in the region and world, really. And then you've got Provport, you've got Quonset, and you've even got, like in this proposal that we're going to talk about, you've got proposals for a new deep water port based perhaps in East Providence that would be dedicated to offshore wind, have laydown space for blades and masts for offshore wind, and really take our supply chain to a whole new level to feed that industry. So, Bill, those are just a few things. We could keep on going on, but we probably need to move.
Yeah, this could be like a 7-hour episode. You're obviously filled with a lot of enthusiasm around this topic. And I think that's one of the things that is making it grow as well. It's just, it's people powered. It's something that's generative and it excites people. And there's a lot of good reason for optimism. You mentioned the deep water ports of Rhode Island. I mean, there's obviously a negative connotation with that for a lot of people. They think about the slave trade and how the deep water ports in Newport and Bristol allowed for that to happen. It therefore creates an obligation, if nothing else, on a moral level, to reimagine what those deep water ports can be. That comes down to Smart Bay, which is something that in and of itself is just such a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
And shipping and development in so many interesting ways. I guess looking at all of these possibilities for growth, for rewriting our history, for redefining Rhode Island as an economic driver, perhaps the Rotterdam of the Western Hemisphere, how would you describe the optimism right now in this sector and how that is motivating innovation and how that is creating and driving ideas here in the state and attracting almost like a magnet worldwide talent to Rhode Island?
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what's going on. And I think that's why we're at the right place at the right time with the right ecosystem of partners, because that combination of natural resources along with an ecosystem that has been building strength over time, in some of those independent entities all coming together. And really, I think that's what led the universe, even before this proposal and this opportunity with the Economic Development Agency for this Build Back Better Regional Challenge $1 billion opportunity came into being. We were already working on putting together a Blue Tech innovation campus for all intents and purposes. And actually that was, motivated by the Rhode Island, the Secretary of Commerce, Stephen Pryor for Rhode Island, along with the president of URI and even in the governor and many others, really driving us to say, hey, how can we take all these things and all this excitement and drive forward and build the places and spaces and really the momentum we need to bring all these entities together. So that's actually what brought URI together, working in partnership with Rhode Island Commerce Corporation, and about dozens of partners. Almost by the time we got done, we had over 80 different partners who came together. We did convenings, broke into work groups, and came up with a tremendous proposal that we put forward to redefine the blue economy really to begin with at a Rhode Island stage and really drive it to the next level. But then that will take us regionally and nationally to allow us to really redefine what the blue economy is. So in really targeting, by the way, doubling or tripling the number of jobs in the next decade that we'll have here in Rhode Island, adding 50,000 plus jobs and taking that $5 billion number and driving it 2, 3, 4-fold is really our target here over the next decade, so that we can lead, not just take the organic growth and the tremendous growth we have already, but accelerate it even more, Bill, with all those assets that you talked about coming together to make that happen.
For daily content of all things Rhode Island and beyond, follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, even LinkedIn. Search for me, Bill Bartholomew, and I'll meet you there. When I started Bartholomew Town a few years ago, there really weren't any Rhode Island podcasts, and obviously, podcasting was in an exponential growth period as a whole. But here in Rhode Island, it wasn't a big thing. Now, fast forward into the pandemic, and here we are in 2022, and podcasting has emerged as a great way for just about everybody to communicate an idea or anything else for that matter. You can always take a Zoom call and just post it online. But if you really want to see results, let me help you out. Send me an email, bill@ripodcast.com, and let's discuss some of the ways that B-Town Media can help to improve or even develop your podcast from the ground up. bill@ripodcast.com. Let's build something together.
Now back to B-Town.
Let's talk about the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. What it is, what your role is in that, what the state's opportunity is for that, and even specifically how that translates to everybody here in Rhode Island. What kind of opportunity there is from this specific program and grant opportunity.
Sure. So let me try to again, we'll go back to that 30, 40,000 foot level view of what the Build Back Better Regional Challenge opportunity is. And then we'll double click on that and go in and talk about some details. So at the highest level, back in June, July, August, the U.S. Federal Economic Development Agency, now led by former Governor Gina Raimondo, came forward with a very aggressive and visionary opportunity where they had American Rescue Plan dollars that were allocated to the EDA at a federal level. And they decided to create this thing called, and it's been a common theme that we hear, Build Back Better. But in this case, this is the EDA's Build Back Better Regional Challenge, where they took $3 billion and they split that across a couple of big programs. One of the biggest programs, kind of the moonshot type program, is $1 billion opportunity that they created that states and regions and teams could get together and make proposals to get some portion of that $1 billion to ultimately engage in a project that's transformational. And I actually had the honor of listening to former Governor Raimondo talk about it a couple weeks ago, and she really put it beautifully when she said what she envisioned here for teams were the opportunity to create a generational change in their local regional economies. Whereas normally the type of change and funding we'd be talking about $5-10 million, which is more money than one can imagine usually. But usually these things would happen serially. You'd build one thing and then you'd work on that for a little while. You'd build another thing and it would happen over 20, 30, 50 years, right? Through multiple generations of workforces. She and the team there envisioned this as an opportunity to, with one fell swoop, if you can put together a compelling story of why and how you can do it, and that you have the capacity to do it, how you could do all these projects in parallel and in concert and really drive things together in a big way. So that's what the opportunity is. It ended up that it's a phase 1 and phase 2 process. And phase 1 ended with a submission in the early fall. There were 500, much to our surprise, and I think the federal government's surprise as well. There were 529 applicants. But we were so lucky as to be one of 60 who were chosen out of those 529 to proceed to the next level. With that, basically that first level was a small grant to help us with convenings and to drive forward with the proposal. But what you really won was the opportunity to play for the big prize of the $1 billion. So 60 of us were named, 60 different teams, us being one of them. Actually, Rhode Island's also participating in another biotechnology one as well with Massachusetts and Northeastern University, and URI is involved in that. And we're very excited. But on the blue side, we were one of 60 that got in there, and now 20 to 30 of those. So if you're doing that math, a third to a half of those will be chosen through our next submission to get some portion of that $1 billion, which could be 30, 50, as much as $100 million a piece if you were really compelling. So that's what we're going for. And now drilling down in a little bit further, as we looked at it, we have a combination of platforms and programs and projects that make up our proposal. And let me list them off really fast. And I'm going to do it from memory, which is always dangerous, just on the fly. But the platform that really underpins all this is something we are calling the Smart Bay. And then kind of the front door to the Smart Bay in a control center and a central node for it that would link into other nodes of like spaces in areas in our state, region, and across the world is something called the Blue Tech Innovation Center and the infrastructure around that. And that's envisioned to be a place, a building with certain functions and capabilities that would really complement the Smart Bay and allow teams to come in. I'll talk more about that. So we've got the Smart Bay platform and a place and a project called the Blue Tech Innovation Center. Another core concept is workforce development, and actually equity-based economic equity, including diversity, equity, inclusion, making sure that underserved populations, BIPOC and women who traditionally did not have access to these opportunities and even now have a hard time having access. That's a real problem even now. And we have to systematically solve that and really design this whole thing so that with this workforce development and even business accelerators and entrepreneurship training, we do it in a very equitable way. So we can really unleash the talent that's available there across the board, including in our urban core, in neighborhoods that traditionally away from the water wouldn't have the opportunity. So there's this platform of Smart Bay, the Blue Tech Innovation Center, and then workforce development across all of our projects. So those are kind of horizontal cut-throughs. And then we have some projects, really, I think 4 projects that then are examples of what we want to do with this platform and these workforce development training and these innovation spaces. Those projects are a deep water port, like we talked about, possibly in East Providence, the South Key property there. Also, really very cool and core to the offshore wind industry. We're envisioning a Quonset multimodal training center. And that's a big mouthful, but what that really talks about is any kind of transportation integrated into one facility with programmatic training over it that would allow you to access offshore wind. It's an incredible, that's where all the job growth is. And or a very large portion of job growth. And they would do that by air, by ocean surface. And there's even a really cool company, basically Regent, I believe is their name, talking about doing a hovercraft type apparatus on the bay, like water taxi hovercrafts. And that's Beautiful. Real technology. And they're actually, I hope I'm not misspeaking, but they're looking at setting up a headquarters here in Rhode Island. So, whether it be on the water, above the water in the sky, or just above the water, and maybe in the future, even underwater, we're looking at multimodal training. The folks at Quonset are looking at setting up a training center for that with great equitable access to it. So that's one of the projects. The Deepwater Port is another project. And then two other projects that are envisioned and very important speak to the aquaculture and the fisheries. On the fisheries side, we're working really hard with some great folks, the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, the DEM, Rhode Island Commerce, in many towns and municipalities. I think in this, the town of Narragansett, and looking at what we could do for wastewater treatment, for seafood wastewater treatment. It's actually one of the greatest constraints on our seafood processing industry. And we still actually, we may be the calamari capital of the world, but we still have to export a great deal of our catch. We actually catch it and then export it to be processed and then re-import it. Thus actually giving money to other people to do that processing when we could do it here, make it much more efficient, and ultimately allow our existing companies like Town Dock and Sea Freeze and those good people to expand their businesses here and hire more people, and also allow other companies to come in and set up shop here and become powerhouses. So that's on the seafood wastewater treatment side, and really expanding our municipal capacity to process that water. And we're going to probably really undertake a real planning view on that and build out on that with this grant submission or proposal. And then on the other side, we're also taking a look at, we have over 80, I think somewhere between 80 and 90 shellfish fishermen in aquaculture here, focused on aquaculture and growing oysters, for example, oyster fishermen. And one of the things they face every year is, will they be able to get the spat, the oyster seed, basically, to grow their oysters? And they have to go out of state. During the pandemic, some of them woke up and they couldn't get let's call them just baby oysters for all intents and purposes. So we're working with a group here, a group out of Matunic, the DEM, some of the same folks we talked about before on the fishery side, to take a look at setting up an oyster hatchery and really on how to do that with a smart oyster hatchery that would supply oyster spat, safe, reliable oyster spat to our whole ecosystem here in Rhode Island that needs it. And then even Rhode Island's one of the few states that allows the export of that. So it would turn into a regional business and revenue opportunity. So number one, it would be food security and resiliency for Rhode Island. And it would allow that industry to grow even bigger. And number two, it would allow us to serve the region and actually create a growth industry for Rhode Island. And so you see in that whole thing, there's this vision of a platform, programs that go across their innovation, entrepreneurship, acceleration programs, as well as workforce development programs that cut across all the industries, and then 3 or 4 target projects that are designed to really drive forward to tomorrow, if it, so to speak, in offshore wind, and making sure that Rhode Island has more than our fair share of that industry and takes a leadership position, and in aquaculture and fisheries. And that's just the beginning too, Bill. If we could, we'd put 5 more projects in there, but it's the start. And the one thing I want to say too is that we want to have the opportunity to really see this as a first at bat. There are other opportunities beyond this EDA. So whether the EDA comes through or not, and we sure intend to win that, but there are other opportunities, and the governor himself has pledged in his budget, 70, including the port, over $100 million towards this effort in Rhode Island. So we've got multiple people who are so excited about being on this program.
And those are all spectacular things. And I think this is going to work out. I've got a feeling there's some magic in the air and things are going to start to connect on this,
you're
proposal.
Right. I think you're right.
Last question. The simplest of things sometimes are also important to consider in these types of enormous conversations. something Attorney General Nerone has been working on a great deal is shoreline access. And it's something that's constitutionally protected for Rhode Islanders. It kind of fits into the blue economy in that recreational sense. I guess, when people think about recreation and so on and so forth, there is an industrial component to it. I mean, of course, sometimes you're paying to go on the beach, or you go out to a restaurant after you go to the beach or something like that, or, vessels and so on and so forth. That's there. But there's also just the appeal of being in Rhode Island because you can walk onto the shore. You have access to the natural resources. And that can be a talent magnet in and of itself. How important is it just from a fundamental, basic, I guess, almost environmental lens for us to ecologically manage our shoreline, our bays, actually, our bay and sound and open ocean, so on and so forth? The ecology of all of this, the fundamentals, that can't be lost either, right?
No, well, I think you just nailed, you just completely identified if not one of the major magic pieces that Rhode Island brings to this. This is how we've been doing this. And this is where we're uniquely situated with the resources and talent and expertise that we have. As we talked about before with the offshore wind farm, it was the URI Coastal Resources Center working with the federal government and working with local governments, making sure that they had an eye towards the ecology and the sustainability and the safety and health of the shore that took place, that allowed that development to happen where others stumble. And that is absolutely also one of the secret magic ingredients that we want to drive forward. Is we help with this proposal to define the new blue economy for Rhode Island and then the United States and the world. It's really important that be done sustainably, and it be done with an eye towards ecology, and it be done with lack of it sounds corny, but doing it in sync with nature so that it's sustainable and so that folks continue to also be able to experience that other magic piece of this, which is the incredible quality of life that you get here in Rhode Island, where all these things are happening, but you can also drive down Route 1A or over the bridge from Newport and see the most gorgeous ocean ecosystem ever. So maintaining that while building this economic growth, and if you do that together, you bar the door. You're leading the way.
Pete Rumsey, he's leading the way when it comes to a lot of things in the state right now. A lot of people don't realize what's happening inside the belly of the beast, but our future, there's a lot of complaining that happens in Rhode Island. And having grown up here, that was something that was extremely disturbing, was the constant demoralized approach of the roads aren't good. The place is corrupt. There's no industry here. Everyone's leaving. The schools are this, the schools are that. And the blue economy, amongst other things as well. I think there's a lot of excitement around innovation as a whole and in the arts sector. And there's a lot of things. The blue economy is the frontline driver of innovation and where we're going. There's no question about it. So it's something that all Rhode Islanders should be passionate about.
Agreed. Where, Chris, there's still, as you said, there's problems with everything that's a part of the human condition and life as we drive this forward. But there are so many good people on this right now that I get the pleasure of working with and who are driving this and trying to do very good things for the state. I think it really is a magical time, especially to have this level of hope and optimism and really freneticism on the heels of the global pandemic. It is magic. I think you started out by saying something's in the air. Something is in the air. Something's in the ocean. Something's in the ocean air, right? So I agree with you. I think we're going to do tremendous things here. And this isn't a one-shot thing. This isn't a high stakes. This is something we're doing, and there's going to be all kinds of opportunities to drive it forward. I think we're in a very good time to drive forward, and really also leaders like the president of URI, the governor, the commerce secretary, many business leaders, too many to name, in other, by the way, other educational, CCRI, Rick, Brown, RISD, just to start to name them, are all on board with driving this. Roger Williams University is huge as well. So it's all good.
Even Iris and Newport,
absolutely.
Huge elements there.
Yep.
Pete, we could go on forever. I know you got a lot going on right now. I appreciate your time very much.
Thank you so much.
Rhode Island's podcast of record, B-Town.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.